Even if children have dyslexia, they can still enjoy reading just as much as everybody else, especially in the school holidays. Some children are very receptive to books and some less so, but that really doesn't matter. The bigger point is that everyone can enjoy books and can enjoy reading, but we really do have to put the foundations in place for this to happen. Summer is the perfect time to find a public library and visit it every single week. I recommend taking a bag with wheels or a strong backpack. Make sure that everybody can carry all the books home. Make sure that you take home as many books as possible. I can remember loading a baby buggy up with 30 books and making a huge tower of the books in my children's bedroom when we got home. They'd loved taking a really long time to choose the books in the library, and they were delighted to read them with me every single day until it was time to take them back again and begin the whole process once more. Part of that magic was that my children enjoyed having so much choice. You see, they weren't involved in food shopping, and so choosing for them was definitely a huge novelty. They would pick books because they were unusual in some way. So there were weeks when all the books were extra big or extra orange, or all of them were about the tiny little creatures like ants or bugs or mice. And if I suggested a chapter book, as I was definitely ready for paragraphs at bedtime stories, they would admonish me, "No, mummy, it's our choice." So we continued for a long time with picture books, full of enormous print and fabulous illustrations that absolutely enthralled them. And they'd sit there looking deeply into a picture, arguing about what was happening. At the time, I thought we should be working our way through Charlotte's Web or James and the Giant Peach. But these two children were mining every single book for every shred of meaning. Now, looking back, I can see that they were very curious about the pictures. They were interrogating the pages for the details, and these details meant much more to their young minds than James and the Giant Peach might have done. Let's fast forward about 5 years. We'd moved far away from our local library and we were living a very different life. The summer holiday was a time for visiting friends, there were long car journeys, and this was really a time to reconnect with my children after the really busy term time of teaching. Both of them were at primary school and they had both learnt to read, but they were not interested in going to a different library. So I decided to switch the whole situation up. "We are going book shopping," I said. I needed to visit the Institute of Education in central London, and my children came with me on the train. Now, very close to the Institute of Education, there is an enormous flagship bookstore on the corner of Gower Street. And in we went. I planted them in the children's department and I showed them quickly where all the different genres were, and I was so intrigued to see what would interest them. One of my children had recently been diagnosed with dyslexia, although she absolutely loved books. The dyslexia meant that the words moved when she looked at them, but with special glasses she was learning to adapt. So they both chose books with short chapters and clear illustrations. But most important to them were the diary stories, things like the Princess Diaries, and of course, Sue Townsend's 8-part series of The Secret Diaries of Adrian Mole, aged 13 3/4. I can see now that diaries were the perfect choice. The structure was clear, the language was very concise, and of course, packed with behind-the-scenes antics and mischief-making. They were hilarious for the children, and they'd giggle in the back seat of the car as we motored to and fro visiting friends and family. Have you got your books? I'd say before we'd leave the house. Perhaps the format of these books, fairly big print, short blocks of text, and plenty of humour, made all the difference. But honestly, being dyslexic wasn't a barrier to reading any of those books. As my children became teenagers, I kept the tradition going, but I pumped it up. Every school holiday began with book shopping. I set the limit at 4 books each, with the guarantee that we'd come back as soon as they'd read them. I wanted them to choose books that they'd really enjoy reading, and one day I found them reading quietly in their bedrooms. "Mummy, you would love this book. It's so interesting." My 13-year-old was reading Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. This was the first time she had recommended a book to me, and that summer my children started swapping books with their friends. Only one of my 2 children had instinctively loved books as a very young child, but they both developed a love of reading, and I was always delighted to invest in this as often as possible. Of course, they weren't always reading. They would play with their friends, and I remember one such play date at our house. All of the children were hanging out upstairs, and I could hear muffled sounds of laughter and talking. I decided to make a mug of tea, grab a couple of cushions, and I curled up with a book in the corner of the sofa next to a lamp. After 10 minutes, I felt a pair of eyes on me. I looked up, and there they all were, watching me, grinning. I thought nothing of it until the next day, when both of my children were arguing over who could read in that same corner of the sofa. So, let them catch you reading might sound a little bit too strategic for the natural flow of family life, but I can promise you it really works.